Well, hello. Today we are joined by Kyle Gordon, who is a dedicated husband, father, and restaurateur. He was born and raised in Austin, Texas, where he attended school at the University of Texas. After school, he spent many years as a leader in the restaurant industry. Then, in 2013, he started his own restaurant concept, Dillas Quesadillas, a QSR focused on primo, grilled to order quesadillas. Dillas now has 11 locations with many more under contract, over 400 team members throughout North Texas and Louisiana, and has sales trending over $20 million. Congrats, by the way. In 2020, he was honored by Dallas Business Journal as a 40 under 40 and by the National Restaurant News as one of the most influential restaurant executives. He's a passionate hospitality guy with ketchup in his veins that he has the vision to see Dillas worldwide. He and his wife and business partner, Maggie, have two children, Parker, 14, and Grace, 12, who you'll find him spending time with when he's not flipping quesadillas. Kyle, welcome to the podcast. We are honored and thrilled to have you join us today. That was a long and very accoladed sort of intro and
Yeah.
bio. Do you have anything to add that we might have missed?
No, I think that was perfect. I'm over here trying to cool down still. I'm blushing about all those accolades that I've got on there. Yeah.
I like it. Plus, I do enjoy a good quesadilla.
Awesome.
So here's my first question for you. We heard that you have grown Dillas, which now has 11 locations, many, many more under contract. It was grown from the ground up.
Mhm.
And there are a number of things that go wrong, but also a number of things that have to go very, very right to get to successful expansion and growth. But I want to dive into something that we talked about as we were being introduced for this call. You said that the key to success is making one great decision. Can you talk to us a little bit about that great decision and why it has led to your success?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the main thing is culture, right? And so like having a people first culture was the first decision that we made. And, this goes all the way back to 2013 and just being like, you know what, like we want to create a place where people are respected. They've got great opportunity. We can make an impact. And so, you know, just knowing people throughout the years and knowing people in all different industries, like it's kind of one or the other. It's like you're either going to be a people first culture company or you're not, because so many of the decisions that you have to make along the way, whether it's benefits, whether it's days off or anything else that might come along. Um, it's like, okay, the first filter is like, are we people first or not? Right. And so like that's super important for us. And that has been a huge I guess guidepost, guide star, whatever you want to call it, for us. And so knowing that, and knowing how important the units are to us, the big decision and the thing that's so important for us is just making that first people choice, and that's to get a fantastic GM operator in those, locations, because it all stems from them, and it all goes from there, and, they're the one who are living out and implementing that people first culture.
I'm really curious. I've done a lot of hiring in my way too many years to count at this point. And
Mhm.
we try to make the best decisions we can, right? Have you had experiences where they haven't gone as well as you'd hoped? Have you had experiences where that one big decision hasn't turned out exactly as you had set out in your mind to achieve?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, this is the restaurant business, and you know what the most interesting thing is like it's so sad, because the smaller you are, the harder it is, right? And early on, you've got to I made so many sacrifices on people, right? Because maybe they had been, you know, moved around a lot and but they were, had great potential or something like this. You have to really in the early days, take a writer on some people, it's like, man, like this person's a little bit damaged. But like I can only pay X because I don't have any sales yet, or I've got this amount of sales. And, you've got to look at your budget and you've got to say, listen, I've got 29% of my whatever I bring in is allocated towards the people in this restaurant, right? And so what can I afford for that? It's this, and that goes up as your sales go up and et cetera. So, you of course you make mistakes because the business dictates essentially to you that like, hey, you have to make mistakes. You have to bring on some people that are not going to survive the full trajectory of this company, right? And so we've been open for 11 years now, and if I go back in time and think about all the different GMs that we've had, we've got 11 restaurants now. I bet we've had probably 22 GMs, something like that, not a really high turnover rate, because typically we would, you know, um, allow for lots of room for growth. We would give 3 or 4 or 5 strikes, depending on where the company was and how much bandwidth we had to be able to say, you know what? I know that they just struck out, but why don't we give them one more at bat? Because we're also opening another restaurant next week, or this is rolling out, or this is happening. And so there's so many different things as you scale up, that are difficult, in terms of making those mistakes, needing to meet people where they are. But back to my original point, why it's easier as you grow is because you can demand more out of your people, right? Because they've heard about your culture. They feel secure that you're going to be able to actually pay them every 2 weeks. They see what benefit package that you have. They know basically what your average unit volumes are. So they kind of like know that they're going to have a good team, ability to hire managers. There's growth potential. So now we're in a much better position. We're not Chick-fil-A or Raising Cane's or a billion-dollar company, but, we can kind of compete, for those types of operators because we can offer different things culturally and a lifestyle perspective stuff, that is a little bit better, even if the full financial comp package isn't the same. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, but that's kinda where I stand on that particular one.
Yeah, it absolutely did, and I think it's interesting, we always see these overnight successes, right? And I realize 11 years is, it takes time, but
Mhm,
oftentimes we think that these, organizations, especially in the restaurant space, the ones that are successful, it happened just by, luck and happenstance, but there's a lot of challenge that goes into it as you build up a restaurant, and so even when we've identified that first right decision, right, and having that people first culture, mistakes can be made along the way, but they are
mhm.
recoverable, and I think that is just a really important life lesson.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, they're recoverable and, like, nowadays, like, in terms of, the right onboarding, and kinda getting them, into the Dillos culture, a lot of that process now and what we found is that those core values are so important that have been established the whole time because year 1 your core values are still kind of like, Play-Doh, right? "Oh, I wonder if this is gonna work out." You're, like, squeezing the little spaghetti out of the little Play-Doh thing. And then, like, now, though, it's like, no, like, this is what we know it's gonna be, and they might change in 10 years, but, like, they've been very rock solid, and we spend a lot of time trying to ensure that those core values and then the traits that kind of go around each core value, um, are something we spend a lot of time on because those things are very difficult to change. You're not, it's not going to happen if they're just not aligned, with certain things, whether it's integrity or professionalism or, these different kind of, servant leadership traits, that you've got. And so nowadays, like we're spending much more time on that and identifying that and meeting them where they are as a person. Because when your systems get mature, you can train people on the systems. That is so much easier now, right? They don't have to be like, oh, there's not a system for this. I need to be creative. I need to be a superhero in terms of operations. Like, no, there's a systems for 95% of things now. So it's really just about the type of leader that you're putting into that location and vetting for that, and vetting for those core values, and everything else after that is so coachable if they're the right person, you know?
Yeah, and you talk about obviously the GM being that main hire. They're the ones that are carrying your culture through to not only the hires at each location, but also to the consumer. Make sure that those values are carrying over there. What's some of your process on, like, do you look internally for those GMs, or have you had the opportunity to do that now that you're expanding at a little bit faster rate? Or what's your process
Mhm.
on identifying that that person is the one to carry out those values?
Yeah, I think internal first is where we always start, right? Like if we could be 100% organic internal, that's like my dream. That's like the, Shangri-La, right? Like that's like what everybody wants. Um, but you outstrip that pretty quick, and you learn really fast in the restaurant business is that like even a short time on the bench for A players, um, it it's difficult for them to not leave to go take another opportunity because when you're moving through the ranks in the restaurant business, I mean, you're talking about quantum leaps. $10 turns into $20 an hour for maybe a leader manager position. And then that $20 an hour turns into maybe 70,000 a year to 100,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like, oh, like it's just little baby steps up this ladder. They're pretty significant. And so the people, especially that like you can kind of tell have got the aptitude, you either need to move them up really quickly to get them into that position, get them trained up and right, or you need to go external. So to your point, um, most of the time, we're looking internally while posting the job externally. We're interviewing internal candidates, which again, I would love to have because we already know that they are aligned with the culture. They're so much easier to onboard, so much easier to train, so much easier to get them in position and leading their teams. Whereas when you bring on an external candidate, the vetting process is much more intense. We've got to put them in front of our area leader, then they've got to get put in front of me and potentially Maggie, whether that's at the same time or different times. Um, they've got to go through a working interview process to be in the restaurants and part of the culture of the restaurant to see if it's something that's going to be a great fit for them and also for us. We've got to follow up and ask the right questions to the people that they've worked for. So it's like it's a lot of stuff that it takes to do it, but it's required because it's just it's easy to completely strip mine your internal talent quickly. We've done it multiple years at Dillas and to varying degrees of success and results, right? And what often happens is that it can, damage the restaurant that you're kind of taking from. And so if you're like, okay, these three assistant GMs, we're going to take all three of them from these three locations and we're going to give them opportunities to be GMs at new locations. Well, then you've got three restaurants that are kind of, severely, you know, reduced in terms of their operational capacity, their culture, what that person meant to that restaurant. And so it can maybe even take you a step backwards. So we try to mix it to where we're not always just completely taking all the talent away from our great GMs who've spent so much time developing it, but doing it really responsibly and mixing in also external candidates because they're so valuable to the organization. How silly would it be just to only have people who have only known Dillas? Right? Like, we want some Chick-fil-A people in here. We want people from Raising Cane's. We want people to come in and challenge why we do certain things, you know what I mean? Like, we don't know it all, like, we 100% are humble and vulnerable and ask for help and, like, or say, "Hey, listen, we've got room to grow." And that challenge, that specific challenge, that attracts the right people because they want to have their voice heard. They want to have a seat at the table. They want to be able to impact change. And you don't get that at McDonald's. You don't get that at some of these bigger companies who are paying around the same as we are for that top leader. You're just another kind of gear in the cog a little bit. It's like, well, why don't you be quiet and go run your restaurant again? We don't need you to tell us how many pickles to put on this. We've done 500 R&D tests on that over the last 60 years. So, But for us, every person matters. So we've only got around 500 people in our organization. So it's like, okay, if you're going to be one of the elite 11 that are actually running those locations, you're going to have a really big voice. So, um, that's a long-winded explanation for kind of how we bring in GMs, but yeah, take what you can get.
So one of the things you mentioned just a little bit earlier was around systems, that the rest
Mhm.
was coachable as long as we could teach people how to use the systems, gain competence and skill sets. My guess is, and please tell me if I'm wrong, my guess is you evolved that over time, right? Not only
Mhm.
operationally, especially as you add on more locations. In your experience, how has technology helped or hindered your ability to grow and scale? And what does that mean for you operationally?
Oh, I mean, technology is incredible these days, especially as it pertains to restaurant business. Um, when we started this company in 2013, I've got to get back in like my time machine here. Sometimes it's hard to go to those dark places. But like this was when like uh things like hot schedules were kind of I don't they weren't just like at every location. They were kind of emerging. And you think about hot schedules now, that's like the lamest, easiest piece of technology with like 8 competitors, right? Is digital scheduling. But back then, that was like kind of an early piece of your technology solution. And a lot of places still only had Excel, right? And like we're just kind of doing schedules that way and copy and paste and no analytics. And even now, like even within the last few years, predictive analytics has like really emerged. Most of the time, it didn't work up to a couple of years ago. It just didn't work. Like it couldn't integrate properly and all this other type of stuff. So for us, technology has always been something that we've embraced. We're very blessed that we started in 2013, like when essentially the restaurant digital revolution started, right? Because at that time also, you people were starting to move to the cloud, right? Like when we opened the first location, we were on Microsoft Res 3700, which is still a database driven system. And we quickly, I think it was a year in or maybe two, we moved to Micro's Symphony. And that was like the first of its kind. And then with that, that enabled us to do this like kind of new credit card batching technology where it wasn't in-house. It was something that was like completely secure. And like so we didn't have to worry about that layer of security anymore. And then like on and on, like things continue to like come to the restaurant space and be integrated. And you guys probably remember this. I certainly do. Like we at one time, I forgot the year, we had like 7 tablets on it looked like manning a NASA space station, right? You're like, all right, who's ordering today? You're like, you basically had to have like an IT person, like nerding out in front of like this crazy array of things beeping and sending printer orders, and none of it worked right. And like so we've just always tried to lean into leveraging technology to make the life of the operator easier so they can spend more time with their team and customer. That's what technology is for. It's to make life easier. And if it doesn't pass through that filter, if it complicates the life of the general manager in some way, if it complicates the life of the team in some way, then that will ultimately create some level of friction for our customer. And that will be reflect negatively upon our sales and growth and everything else because we want our experiences at Dillos to be as smooth, as frictionless, as sexy as they possibly can be. It's not as beautiful and harmonious as the big boys are, like Starbucks app and all that stuff. But all of that is coming to the emerging brand level, right? It's like you know, patience is super important, but now accessibility for smaller brands is more prevalent than ever. Like we don't have to be compromised because we're small anymore necessarily, depending on how you want to allocate your funds and your resources. But if you want to operate that like that, it's because you're choosing to. It's not because there's not a resource available to you. Like we had to bust our butt like 3, 4 years ago to even get an Olo to take a call with us, to be able to build any sort of like loyalty platform. Hopefully Olo is not a sponsor of this, but I love them. I mean, but anyways, but like, little stuff like that that was like impossible, unattainable, has started to kind of creep our way. And now we're looking at AI tools that are like so predictive and so helpful. And, you know, I've got so many stories on this because it's really come in clutch. Uh, for my personal lifestyle, my wife and I, Maggie, run this thing. And we'd be at like go down to Austin for Thanksgiving or something like that. And like there would be an issue. And like it without the ability to be able to like remotely dial in or change something on the point of sale or whatever. I mean, we'd have to shut a restaurant down basically, and so to it allows for a little bit more restaurateur freedom, movement, like flexibility, like these types of things, problem solving from afar, being able to keep a smaller team to be profitable, at a level that we are without having layers and layers. So I think it's great. I can't say enough about it, and we continue to lean into it.
I think your last few minutes of conversation are it's going viral. Mark my words. I love at Wisetail, we very much believe that technology is a supporting tool. It doesn't
Mhm.
replace, it doesn't supplant. It is definitely a supporting and complementary contributor to your entire team's engagement. And it sounds like, especially this last part, technology has helped you scale. And quite
Yeah,
honestly, had it not been for or but for, right? You wouldn't have been able to get to this great place that you are because everyone would still have to have their fingers manually in the pot of goodness that is operations.
true. So true. It's so true. Yeah. No doubt. And I mean, like, the other thing is like, even in the last couple of years, like, think about how, like, amazing it's been to be able to connect with people over, video conferencing, be able to, like, a lot of it even, has gone into like, "Hey, I know that you're having an issue with that piece of equipment. Can you show it to me?"
Mhm.
Right? So you don't think about like the speed of our networks these days, but like just having streaming video available to you and like at all times at almost every location is insane. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, show me that. Like let's go look at it and oh, zoom in a little bit. And it's just like the everything that touches the restaurants and all the different things that you can kind of leverage, in our modern era, make things more streamlined, more connected. All of our conference calls, like I remember, like, I don't remember what the service was, but like dialing like into a conference center number and then pressing 7986 and then like waiting in the, and then you jump on the call and like somebody's like still chatting. Oh yeah. Can you close tonight? No, I can't close tonight. Oh, well, if you could come in, you know what I mean? You're like, "Hey, somebody go on mute. Please go on mute." It's like now, like we're like living the dream. You know what I mean? Like with video conferencing, being able to reach out, talk to franchisees. What are your issues? Like we're just so much more connected. Communication's better. Communication's everything. So yeah, to your point, it's been really great.
And I'm sure with how quickly technology has evolved, I mean, you had talked about onboarding and implementation and bringing on new employees. How often are you having to revisit that just with the different number of tools that you're introducing and making sure that your culture still remains the focus of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff. Most of the technology is kind of like before they hit the front door, right? And so whether it's like Indeed helping us aggregate the right person for this and then kind of how they link over to our assessment profiles and these different things, a lot of the tech is the pre-experience, I guess you could say, in terms of like helping them schedule an interview. Oh, click here, and then it drops under our GM's calendar without having to have a phone call. Like all of that has been fabulous, right? In terms of getting them there to that interview and then them getting hired and then onboarding happens after that. And I will tell you that that is slightly more analog, right? And on purpose, right? Because you get to be face to face, which is kind of rare, right? There's a reason that we're not doing this in person. Really hard. You know what I mean? Like we can't all get in the same room. for a multitude of different reasons. And so when that team member walks through that door the first time and they see the space, they're they see their uniform sitting there in a little bow, like on the table. They smell the bacon that's getting prepped for the day. You know what I'm saying? It's a different type of vibe. And like there's not a lot of technology in it. It's a lot of face to face, right? The technology comes in when they watch. We have a standardized orientation video. It's kind of boring, but it has to be, and it's authored and read by me. I'm a little cartoon in it, so like I had myself animated throughout the whole thing. I'll send it to you guys if you want a real laugh. But anyways, I'm like, hey, like this is how you log in, and this is how you check in for the day, and this is how you do your schedules, and this is when you're gonna get paid. And then so that's all super consistent because I don't want there to be any kind of like inaccuracies or guesswork when it comes to that. So that piece of technology is there. But then the operator closes the laptop and says, all right, now let's talk about your life here, Dillas. Like, here's your training manual. Here's how this is going to work. Here's our operational platform. Here's how you can check your schedule. Here's how we communicate with each other on Sling. Like you're going to, you can, we've got this whole kind of chat board that you can reach out and trade your shifts and stuff like this. And so it's all, I guess, it's kinda like Cyborg. It's like half human, half, computer, because it's so woven into each other. And the cool thing is that adaptation and adoption at this point with most of our team is between 16 and 23 is natural. You know what I mean? They already know, like, what an app is and how to log in, and the fact that they don't, have to call in to get their schedule, like, it's almost an expectation, though. And so, it's not that I feel bad for people that are competing with an emerging brand like me who really, like, have it together and work really hard to develop these onboarding programs and platforms and leverage first class vendors. But they're just like competing with rocks and sticks, and I've got like an Uzi. You know what I mean? Like it's just like it's so difficult if you don't even meet the minimum bar of like what some of these other companies are doing, like Whataburger and the big boys. Like, and so from day one, I told Maggie this: we're gonna act like big boys, either until we are a big boy or as long as it takes. But that will never give ourselves or our team an excuse to be less than Chick-fil-A or Starbucks or whoever it might be that we're competing with. We're gonna put those tools into place and budget it until we can raise the sales to cover it. Right? We're just gonna believe that it will bring what it should bring, right? Which is the consistency, which is the great culture, which is the ease of working with us, the ease of buying from us. And those things will lead long term to the gains that we need to see to be able to continue to grow and continue to innovate and continue to bring on great leaders for our teams and communities. So, yeah, again, long-winded answer for a very simple question, but that's kind of the little sneak peek at the orientation piece.
And I think it's so interesting because you started the conversation by talking about how culture is so important, and throughout this entire conversation, I've taken away some really resonating and key tidbits of the non-negotiables you have, and it sounds like some of those tech pieces and all of the things that actually create a foundation of that culture, that openness and authenticity and communication and all of those pieces, alongside making sure there's a face-to-face component, especially on those very first days. It sounds to me like not only do you focus on that culture building aspect with all of your team members, but from the top down approach, you are incredibly passionate about ensuring that that culture piece is a non-negotiable.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. And I mean, like, culture is like so interesting, because it's kind of a buzzword, right? You know if a place has it or if it doesn't, but everybody says that they do.
It's
Everybody's got a
easy.
culture. It's
Just
either
just Google
yeah,
it.
no problem. But, some are
And
crap.
go to the
Some just
mall.
have a yeah, some just have a culture of, like, not being that great, but, for us, the culture and the best way I describe it is like family with accountability, right? And because we do wanna have a family culture, we do want to care for each other, We want to see people as people and not a number. Make sure that they're appreciated, acknowledged, awarded. All these types of things are super important. But where the rubber meets the road is at the restaurants. You know, like anybody who's running a restaurant, a multi-unit restaurant company, really quickly understands that they're very similar to the military. You're running a decentralized command, right? You've got operators that are their little mini COOs out in the field, right? And they've got to make game time decisions in the moment on behalf and advocate for their customer, right? Through their team, you know? And so supporting that, right, is the most important thing. That's where the culture emerges, right? I feel supported, right? It's not like, oh my God, we have cake on Fridays. It's so fun. You know, like that's complete bull. You know what I mean? Like those things are cool, right? But like the moment that you don't feel supported, you don't want to be there, right? That you think that the company is working on behalf of profits and not people, people quickly start to see that divide, right? And they want to be respected for their safety. You know, they want to be made to be felt secure at the restaurant. You know, that's what we're guaranteeing them. That's the number one guarantee. You come to work at Dillas, you're gonna be safe. We're gonna do everything that we can to hit that. You know, like life safety is number one. Okay, what's number two? Well, let's figure that out together. You know, like obviously our customers are super important, quality of our food, how fast we get it out, you know, like those are the things that make for the kind of fun aspect of the dynamic work environment of a restaurant. So culture is very nuanced. You know, we've tried the best we can to define it and give it kind of guardrails, so the people in our company can kind of understand, and not have to overthink it. So whether some of the things that that I was just talking about, like little awards, little prizes. Um, I've got so much to say about culture like this in terms of how we do Dilla bills and like all these other things that try to make it fun to come to work for people who generally don't need it. They're just trying to make, 150 bucks every few days so they can, maybe buy an iPhone or pay for some gas or those types of things. They're not typically only 20% of our team is really paying rent, like with their income, working those bigger hours. Most of those people are the leaders in the location. Um, but for us, it's also things like music. Like we had a long call like 3 weeks ago about the music in the restaurants. We had a complaint from a team member. The music is not varied enough, you know what I mean? And it's like, wow, like that really matters to them. So like we like added like 30 or 40 new stations on the iCloud or whatever. I forget what the platform is that we use for our streaming music. But that made them happy. You know what I mean? Like that's what they want. They want great music while they're working. They want clean uniforms, right? They want access to hats and shirts and polos and hoodies and they want to have a friend at work. Like all of these things are kind of like the things that create that culture. But there is one main person there who's helping mold that, control that, hire great people to work with the other great people that are there. And again, that's that GM. Like I can't emphasize how important, how much I love our GMs because they make our life easier at the Primo support office. And it makes us excited to support and help enrich them and enrich their lives. Because it's a very difficult job because they're dealing with people all day, the difficult people of customers, just in general, how hard they are to serve, and through the performance of their team members they bust their butt to hire them. They've got 40 of them to worry about. You know what I mean? Like they've got to schedule them, allocate hours properly, in addition to all the other things that we're asking them to do. So they're really heroes. Like seriously, everybody makes jokes about like, capes and all these things, but like they really do wear invisible capes. I'm like, again, I was a GM, so I'm patting myself on the back here. But like it's a tough job and there's a reason it gets rewarded the way it does.
And then what piece of advice, though, obviously you've been doing this for a while, you've had a lot of learned experiences along the way. What piece of advice do you have for our listeners or even for yourself looking back in 2013? What piece of advice would you have given yourself as it pertains to culture for what you could do now to make for a better tomorrow?
Man, like, I think that I would have jumped in a little bit more in terms of, like, the purpose, right? Like, we've identified our purpose now as, like, really building community through primo quesadilla meals and, like, having really defined that, like, what are we here for? It is really big, and in the beginning, it's so much about just survival, right? And it's so much just about like, man, are we going to be able to make it, right? And then it kind of transitions into, um, we have a solid foundation, and now we have the ability to grow and make this happen, in new communities and impact people in different ways. But it's this so many choices along the way. And so if I had to go back, give myself advice, I would just tell myself, make great small choices that you think are gonna have the maximum amount of impact day to day. Think about winning the day, the shift, the period, the quarter, and not trying to think about how you're gonna get to your last number, right? Like, I wanna have 150 Dillas, but I can't unless I have 12. And so the 12th one right now is like my big focus. It's in my near term. I have an eye to the future. I have a vision for that, right? We want to be the brand for primo quesadilla meals worldwide, right? But like at the end of the day, we've got to take care of the people coming to our restaurants today. We've got to focus on operations. Um, we talk all the time because it's so important to our culture about the formula of success, and that's mom, which is manpower, little c culture, big O operations, little FP financial performance, and then big M marketing, right? So kind of mom with a couple little subs. But that's how we prioritize how we look at every location every time if there's an issue, right? So it's like, man, I'm struggling with sales. Okay, well, how's your manpower? It's just the formula, right? It's just about prioritization. It helps us stay on focused and stay keeping the number one thing. What's important now is when. Like all these acronyms, like I'm such a success nerd that like these are the things that like keep coming back to me to help the team stay focused, to help me stay focused on trying to, make an impact in the restaurant space. That's a lot of advice. I don't know, I could probably cut that down to 30 seconds for myself if I was, like, almost out of time or something.
I just that's
I
because I love the
but
word this term or the term success nerd.
Yeah.
yes, yes, and which I mean, going through your equation for success here, it makes a ton of sense why predictive analytics, right, have been so important to you as of late too. So just little little glimmers of insight here. Okay, so wow, I don't know how to come back from that one, but I do have one final question, and this is
Okay.
a little bit of a buzzer beater here because wanna make sure we let you get back to your quesadillas. Um,
Yes.
if you could design your own custom bumper sticker, what would it say and why?
Mm. Um, I would say something like, focus on what you can control. That would be it, right? Because it's very easy to get distracted by the things that you can't control. And so it comes down to your mindset, comes down to your choices, and not just in terms of like business success, but in terms of personal success. I'm a massive believer in showing up right to the Primo support office or to the restaurants. And I think that it has everything to do with like what I read, um, you know, what I watch, the type of mindset I bring to my home life, how I treat my body, how I work out, so it'd probably be like something like that, like, hey, uh, focus on what you can control and make great choices. That would be, I would have to have a long bumper. Like I would need like a Hummer or something like that because I like to talk a lot. Mine would have like a lot of like generic like success quotes or something like that. Something to that tune, to be able to keep somebody, myself included, focused and allow me to remember that it is pretty simple, Don't overcomplicate it, make good choices, and the outcomes are self-determined.
I'm just gonna sit here and bask and marinate in this because I think that's fantastic. Kyle,
Good.
cannot thank you enough for joining us today. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah.
Always excited to talk about culture and growth and opportunities, and wish you all the best on store number 12 and then the worldwide takeover of Dillas Quesadillas.
Coming soon to a corner near you. Thank you.